Live stream.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for SEO Fight Club. Just realized I have not shared my slide yet. Let me go ahead and do that. And we are watching YouTube for comments, so I'll just go say hello there and pop out the chat.
Hello, YouTube.
All right, so today we're just talking SEO again. So if you have any questions at all, just let us know in chat and we'll keep an eye out for those. Other than that, we'll just go through the normal stuff. So Clint, what's new with SEO this week?
Oh, Jesus, that was a nightmare yesterday. I was actually going to do walk through how I do web page schema in the particular case for Google News, and it seemed like if it could go wrong, it went wrong yesterday. So now I know how all you guys feel when I break your SaaS products, because I broke mine almost instantly. So, and I did it live, which I kind of like, right? So it kind of just, to me, it just says, hey, look, yeah, we're human, this shit breaks, and here's how we fix it and we address it, right? And so but yesterday I was just not in the mood for that madness, and I was cussing away and I was pissed off at my own product and venting, so it was fun.
Yeah, live demos, they always ramp up my anxiety level for sure.
Yeah,
if I'm going into a live demo, I will have pre-prepared slides just in case disaster strikes. I know now from experience that you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst.
Yep. Well, I only had one article last week, and that was on John Mueller's comments about changing the dates of your content, and saying that if you the word that I kind of jumped on was significantly, and he said if you significantly update your pages, then you should change the dates. And I was trying to figure out, like, I identify what significantly means. I don't know if I think we could test it, right? But in a practical sense, we've done that with some information pages and stuff, and we changed the dates. But in that process, we also changed the URL, so we made brand new pages altogether. So we don't know if it was the date change or the significant updates or what. So,
well, with
trying to figure that madness out.
With the SEO volatility tool, it gets really interesting between Christmas and New Year's, because what you end up seeing is all the bloggers are rolling their dates for the next year, and they're not doing significant changes to the page. They just roll the dates on everything.
Roll the dates, and there's still plugins out there that are auto updating the published dates. I don't know that that's good enough, but it just kind of, I just found it interesting. Significantly change, and I identify what significantly changed is. I mean, I changed the title tag, meta description, H1s, added a whole bunch of images, and added some other content that users wouldn't necessarily see. And added, I don't know, maybe total of 1,000 words to that thing. And I would argue that it's significantly changed. However, Google never, it didn't update it as significantly changed in the search results. So.
Well, there is a precedent for significant change. Like we know from tuning on page that if you change too much all at once, you can trigger a Google dance.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like Google is like, whoa, this changed so much, I'm not sure what it's about anymore. I just need to back everything out, zero everything out, and do the whole analysis again from the ground up to figure out what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
And so usually when you trigger that Google dance, you come back to where you were or higher, But yeah, there is that precedent for significant change causing, significant reprocessing on Google's part.
Right. And before you could use title tag almost to say, oh, like, look, they've read it and they've updated stuff. And with the machine learning changing the title tags now, we can't even see that. And when we do, it's days later. So I updated this page at the beginning of February. And it wasn't until yesterday that we even saw a idea that they might be messing with the title tag and using the new meta description. So from first crawling the changes beginning of February to actually applying to the SERPs is almost 2 weeks. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And I find myself putting test keywords on every page I touch now because I just don't want to fight knowing whether or not Google has processed the latest version of the source yet.
Yeah.
And so you put a test keyword down in the footer that the universe has never seen before. And when you can find that test keyword in search, Google has processed that page content, at least to some extent, versus not at all.
I don't know. That brings us up is one of the tests that we're doing. We're trying to narrow it down, but the fake keyword stuff, we can get those pages indexed left and right and all day, but they're not ranking for our fake keywords anymore. Not even starting, you know what I mean? So I'm not talking about old pages that were ranking. I'm like, these are new test pages, multiple testers, fake keywords, random alpha, lorem ipsum, and some random English. And it seems like Google's, they're putting it in the index. We can find it in the index, but we can't find it ranking for any of the content at all in the pages. That seems to have, it's like new behavior for Google that we're trying to figure out. From my perspective, it's kind of good because if that means the single variable testing is dead, that's awesome because then I don't have to do those anymore. And we can start doing some more in the live and multivariable and how does a real person or a real business owner test this or retest this or implement this. And I think it's the next evolution of testing. But we'll see how long that actually lasts because, as you know, Google will fix something and then some new engineer will go in there and push a button or add a semicolon and it'll all come back. So we'll see how long the single variable stuff. To me, it seems like right now Google's got a handle on it and it's kind of killed it off.
So Clint, let me make sure that I understand so if you create a fake keyword, put out a random alpha page with that fake keyword in there at some percentage, you're saying the page is not ranking for that keyword or it's not ranking for any of the terms on the page?
Any of the content on the page at all. Any various string, single word, sentence, none of it. You won't find any of it. It is, and we know that it's reading the meta descriptions, right? Because when we search for the URL, we see the meta descriptions there, or we see the content it's pulled off of the page to fill the meta description. And it's not even finding that when you search for those strings.
So it's not making its way into the primary index where it's findable by content on the page.
Yeah, it's not being sorted as relevant for this piece of this word or this string or this sentence. None of that matters.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've definitely come to the opinion that testing does need to evolve. One of the things that we've been monitoring for, probably the past year now is the whole .it spam network. It was recently in news headlines as the untitled issue in Google search. That was what most people don't know is that was all one spam network. And that one spam network covered, about 15% of the primary index in terms of if you look at all of the pages that Google will rank for keywords, that's usually between 115 and about 500. They were taking up 15% of just about every keyword. And that's remarkable that when you go and, search for ice cream cone, there they are. And you go and search for Clint Butler, there they are. And you go and search for, they were everywhere. But what that meant to me as a tester is that, all of our tests, they're kind of like crappy thing content. We try to keep them bare bones because that's how you minimize the variables impacting the test. And so we like to be good enough to be indexed in the primary index with our test cases, but not so good that we're throwing the test with strong factors. And these .it spam networks, and they're called .it because when they first launched, they were primarily just .it domain names. Now they've diversified into all country codes. Now we're competing for the bottom with all that spam. And so when they take 15% of the primary index and we need to get 700 test cases indexed, guess who's getting pushed out? It's all of our testing. And so it's not even necessarily that Google has figured out how to thwart testing. It's that other web spammers are doing it so well and so aggressively that they push our SEO testing right out of the primary index. And so I'm looking at this going, okay, Google is pretty much incapable of solving this problem, the web spam problem. And the reason I say that is even though they flushed most of it out of the indexes, it's already coming back under new domains. Like we can find the new .it spam network already. So Google, they can't handle it. And people say, well, why don't you just turn them in? Well, you can't. It's thousands of domain names. Google doesn't have a form for that. They'll let you put in one URL, and these things change on a monthly basis. So by the time Google gets around to looking at it, it won't even be there anymore. So yeah, Google is not equipped to solve this on their end. And from the testing side, we need to adapt to what these spam networks are capable of, because we can't peacefully coexist in that bottom 15%. And there are things that we can do as testers. And one of the things is adapt new testing techniques that we can work with. Instead of having to index 700 pages, if we can test in a way where we index 4 pages, that's a big difference. And we have techniques for doing that. But we need new tools to make it efficient to be able to do it.
Yeah, Ted.
Well, yeah, Clint, because you have the source for the old test tool, but I don't think the old test method works in today's Google.
Well, no, I think your parse, like the way the old tool is set up, right? It makes the 10 pages on one domain and then you can add multiple domains if you want to, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that method is working anymore. It's filtering all that madness out. So that's one of the things I wanted to get it to do, where I say 10 test pages on 10 individual domains. So we figure that part out. And so now I don't have to get, as you say, like 100 URLs indexed. I only got to worry about 10. So I've cut the number down to 10. As for your, what did you call it? Keyword something? That new method of testing?
Oh, keyword interlacing.
Yeah, so I need to figure that. Like, I don't know, maybe you do an episode on that and just kind of show us all what the hell you're talking about, so we get a better understanding of it. And then we can even get it down to one page. I'd be totally happy with one page.
Yeah, keyword interlacing is a cool concept. It's not applicable to every kind of test, but it lends itself very well to certain kinds of tests, like does it index or does it boost, or can I test the whole HTML specification? Keyword interlacing is cool in that you're interlacing multiple tests on the same page, but you're doing it in a way so that, you know, one test is in the foreground of a keyword and the other tests become the random text in the background. And so as you change keywords, different tests emerge from the page and the other tests become the background noise. And so it's a special way of basically interlacing your keyword tests together so that you get multiple on a page, and they shift between being the thing being tested or being the background content.
So the next iteration of that test would that be, I mean, let's do the HTML text. This tag will index and Google will rank the page based off of what's in that tag. The next iteration in my mind would be how do we have to measure the power. So and that's where we get back into the 10 pages and implementing that one change on the rest of them to see, is there any ranking power to it, right?
Yeah, but it becomes, there's a couple caveats with keyword interlacing. It becomes a relative comparison. So it becomes hard to quantify the exact keyword density is an example. So if you're trying to do density testing, you can relatively know that you have more on test A than on test B, but you won't know the exact keyword density until you manually calculate it. So there's that caveat to it. And then there will be things about trying to figure out what's stronger than what. You may have to think more along the lines of tournament brackets. So you make a page for, 10 different things, and you find out which one relatively wins of the 10, and they compete with the winner of the next bracket. And then eventually you ultimately get to what's the most powerful thing if you run the tournament long enough. But you have to change your methodology. It's not the easy leaderboard necessarily. But if you want to find out, how does keywords in a definition tag compare to keywords in an H1, you absolutely can do relative indicators to see where things stack rank.
And I think that's we're at that point, in my opinion, for SEO testing, at least from the perspective of SIA, is we know we've got all of these tests that say these are the single factors, and now we need to put together I don't necessarily want to say template, but these are the factors where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And we've done these tests and we've combined them, and you know what I mean? So like you said, the title tag in the H1s versus the title tag, the H1s, and the meta description versus the title tag H1 and meta keywords. I know, or LSI keywords. There you go. Bruce, Bill, whatever the hell your name is, Schlosky. I mean, what combination of those things can we put together to get the most bang for the buck for business owners and SEOs?
In one of the new concepts, like historically, I would use like 10 exactly the same control cases. And that would kind of account for some of the random volatility. I would want to beat all controls to know that I beat the random volatility being injected as well. And so that's why I always use 10 control cases, because if I only beat half of the controls and they were identical, then I knew I was within the margin of error. But there's another thing you can do with control cases when you're dealing with the relative strength of things is you make relatively strong differences and strength control cases. So you have one control case being a single keyword mention on page. You have another control case being 10 keyword mentions on page. You can have another control case being, a keyword in H1. Can have and that way, when you test that definition tag, how did it compare to a single mention on page? Was it stronger than 5 mentions on page?
Yeah.
How did it compare to an H1 mention? And that way you get a gradient of information on power level that could be more useful for categorizing things into power buckets.
And that's what I think probably the testing tool, getting along that lines is probably the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have Carolyn here as well. Carolyn, what's going on with the podcast?
You guys have been describing exactly where I'm going on the what started out as the index detection project has now turned into something different, but I've completely modified the nature of the test site for those very reasons. And so anyway, that's what I'm going to talk about on the podcast this week. Like, what were some of the changes that I made? Because I wanted to pull my hair out trying to get one of our quote normal test pages indexed. And so now I can do like a regular page, like normal people content, and stick a keyword on there and then test it also, with JavaScript. Is it putting it together? So yeah, so that's kind of what's going on this week, is just yabbering about that a little bit.
Nice. So yeah, we're all in the same bucket. And we've seen this before. I mean, there was a time when we could index test pages with, less than 300 words. They could be super thin. You could do it with one keyword mention.
And within a minute or two.
Yeah, and sometimes, very fast indexing. So there was a time when it was all that easy. And that isn't these days.
Yeah. That's been my experience as well. So just trying to bounce around and come up with some different, and putting a little more automation in it. And I know I'm doing more than one thing, but I've got one set up with instant indexing, the rank math, because I really want to see, like, what does that look like in server logs? How does that work? And I have to say, so far, Bing gets pretty proactive, I would say, in that.
Yeah, especially if you turn up the crawl rate. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that your crawl control settings and Bing Webmaster Tools make a big difference. Like, the defaults in the past have been as slow as crawl 1 page per week, which is amazingly slow. Like, most SEOs do not want to be crawled that slowly. So you got to kind of max it out if you want expedited Bing attention.
Well, and I got to tell you, in this particular site, it's not in Bing Webmaster Tools at all. It's strictly the the Index Now connection. And I couldn't believe how much got crawled, and without trying to put it into Bing, it got into Bing.
Well, yeah. And the Index Now stuff, if you have the website like claimed in Bing Webmaster Tools and you do the Index Now stuff, you will actually see it, those index requests, in Bing Webmaster Tools in like near real time.
Cool.
They'll show up, like you'll see the request dates. And so it's definitely integrated. Like if you do the index now requests, you should be able to verify it all worked in your Bing Webmaster Tools.
That is easier than server logs for sure.
Yeah, but I don't think you need to have it claimed in Bing Webmaster Tools. It'll still work without it as long as you have, your appropriate API key .text file hosted.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk today is about, what are some of people's experience with common technical SEO problems? And it all comes up because recently I made a bonehead mistake on one of my project sites, and I'm paying the price for it now. And the bonehead mistake I made was in the host's configuration file for the Apache web server. The way most people have it configured is that you have specific entries for which domain names get mapped to which folders. And if you're in one of those organizations that just likes to point all the domains that you own at a server, whether they're configured or not, then usually the first entry in the host configuration file will serve content for all those domains that are otherwise not configured. And so when you see people ranking on their IP address, or they get the same content under a different domain name, they have their DNS and Apache configuration messed up in this way. And so the mistake I made was I was rushing things and I put my new domain at the top of the host file. So it became the garbage collect all for every domain name that isn't configured on the server. And of course, Google did not index it for the right domain name. And so the way I fixed it was I fixed the configuration. I made sure the canonicals were set. The domain names that were not in use, I went and did a hard removal from Google Search Console. I got Google to recrawl it, but I'm still paying some price for that mistake. And so that's, one area where technical SEO comes into play is you have to know, oh, this looks like a web server configuration issue. And sometimes they are, like even with page speed, getting H2 enabled on your web server, if you have an older system, most of them are H2 out of the box now. But you have to go in and configure that. For a long time, you had to configure it. And so, even getting fast page load times can be a web server configuration problem. And so it can pay to at least understand at a basic level where you can say, oh, this could be a configuration problem. Let's have somebody look at the web server for it. What do you think, Clint? Where do you butt heads with technical SEO?
Oh, pretty much everywhere. Most of my arguments these days have always been page speed stuff, to be honest. So nothing as complex as what you guys are talking about.
Well, you had one a few months back involving HT access. That's another area where it can get complicated in a hurry.
Yeah, I think it was more me just messing around with that. And what I noticed in particular with HT access is if you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't be messing with that stuff, because you can break things significantly, which I've done plenty of times. So,
well, in HT access, a lot of people, learn a few tricks and they're able to pull them off reliably. But they forget that HT access is a ticking time bomb. Because when you have attrition and people don't know and the knowledge is lost, and then they do web design change or a domain change, or they migrate from one hosting provider to another and not all that stuff gets moved, then boom, everything goes back to its broken state. And for that reason, I like to call those types of solutions a ticking time bomb. Sure, they work, but at some point in the future, it's going to do something bad to you. So Lee, how about you? Where do you butt heads with technical SEO?
Usually it's on stupid things like hosting configurations or SSL or I just had one that I'm going to have to rectify this evening where I started installing one, assuming that I was going to do it HTTPS, and I installed it HTTP. So I've got a mismatch. So I've got to go redo the whole damn thing. So it's always just the stupid little stuff that you have.
Yeah, www. Secure, unsecure, and trailing / no trailing / that's like one whole category in my book. Either you're super strict and consistent with all that stuff, or you're loosey goosey and gonna have some problems.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a common one. So Carolyn, what about you? You're doing forensic SEO training. You have to have all kinds of ideas for technical SEO problems.
Yes, I make mistakes real good. No, but you're covering like all the things that I find I've done, and and it's the I think that's just the name of the game, is we've got to get comfortable with doing that and then literally finding our way back. And sometimes that's everybody out of the pool and we're going to start all over again.
Yeah, sometimes it really does feel like the painful walk of shame back into the rankings.
I know.
But it happens. It's common. Yeah, I feel like a bonehead, but it won't be the last time, I guarantee.
I catch mine faster now. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I do spot them faster. When I made the mistake, I realized what I had done by the next day. Unfortunately, that was enough time to do some real harm. But yeah, it happens to the best of us. You just gotta, be more cautious and make sure you dot all the I's and cross all the T's, because there's a lot of I's and T's in SEO.
Yeah.
So with that, what's going to be on your show again? I forgot if you mentioned that.
You talking to me?
Yeah, your show.
I'm just gonna kind of do a update on the nature of the testing project, the public one.
Okay, so the changes you're making.
Yeah. I'm actually even gonna move into every day doing a short video announcement of what I'm finding as well. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
I'm not testing every day, but I'll be reporting every day. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'm reporting every day on a website called topseofactors.com on updated factor data. So if you want, just let me know the channel and I can publish your content there too. I have stuff to regularly update new headlines and new videos.
Ooh, fun. Okay, I will do that. Thanks.
So yeah. Very cool stuff though. So let's see. I see that we have a few people on YouTube. If you have any questions for us, we're all here and at your disposal. Let us know. Otherwise, I'll think of another topic to start talking about. But mainly, we're here to answer your questions should you have them. Let's see. All right, so let's talk about Google Analytics and how it impacts SEO. Because there's a big headline today that it does not affect SEO, maybe not directly, but when you put in your tracking code for analytics twice on the same page, it sure does communicate to the business a story that might not be real. And likewise, if you fix an issue like that, it might look really, really bad for an SEO until you can effectively communicate how analytics impacted their perception of what's going on that page. And so that's a very common problem. It can get you fired even. So to say that it does not affect SEO, I don't feel is a fair representation of the facts. What do you think on that topic, Clint?
Well, ever since you pointed out all of the errors in the data that we're really getting from Google Analytics, I've in general don't necessarily trust it anymore. I use it still because clients use it still, and I don't put them all on my Matomo account to get a little bit better data. So it's hard. It's hard to like sit here and say, hey, we need to make these business decisions based off of this data that we see and that you have, knowing that 15, 20, 30% of it is missing.
Yeah.
It could be the important piece that's missing. You know what I mean? There's no indicator of saying in there saying, hey, we filtered this down or we filtered that down. You just kind of have to guess.
Yeah, I like to tell people that, to determine if analytics is good or bad, it depends on the specific question you're asking. So if you're trying to find, what are some ideas for things we should be targeting better, it's perfectly fine for that. What are some of our top keywords? It's fine. What percentage of our audience is on iPhone 12? It's good at that.
Yeah.
But those are things that can be solved with sampling. So if your questions can be solved with sampling, then Google Analytics is probably just fine. But if you're asking questions of it like, how much in commission should I pay Clint Butler for his organic SEO revenue? Well, at that point, you're probably going to short Clint 15, 20, 30, 40% of what you should be paying him, because it's abysmal for being used for things of that nature. So if you've built your commission set up based on the analytics data, and I've done that before, I did it for almost 20 years, and you have to customize how you do that to a great extent. Like I had almost a list of 200 different source mediums to remedy the data. I had custom stuff built so I know when people were coming in from organic search. I wouldn't know the keyword, but I know they came from organic search into a page. And then I'd go and look up that exact same page view in analytics to see how it got logged. And, about 10% of the time is like Facebook. It's like, no, that's not even close. I'd understand if you thought it was Google paid versus Google organic, sure, but you just called it Facebook. And so yeah, you see messes like that, and it's very, very hard to try to get accurate numbers for commissions out of Google Analytics. And even and it's because it's a sampled system, and the people at Google would say, well, but we have a paid product that gets rid of sampling. Yes and no. Yes, they have a paid product, but no, it doesn't eliminate all the sampling. You have to request an unsampled report. And many times there are contexts where they simply can't do it. They can't deliver on it. They can some of the time, but not all the time and not everywhere. And so it's very limited scope in that unsampled context. And even when we spent, probably $2 million in consulting services from the highest rated, most recommended company for doing these types of integrations, especially with paid. It took over a year. We had to build custom systems that would figure out the sales that were missing in analytics and upload them as separate files to augment the data. Even then, even after all that investment, paying for the big unsampled thing, it was still 12.5% lossy at its best. And so that's the best you can get throwing a couple $1 million at the problem, is 12.5% lossy. And so, yeah, it really depends on what you're asking of the data as to whether or not it's a good place to go or a really bad place to go. But yeah, and I know most people out there will never ever try to dial in their analytics to be 100% accurate. Here's the key thing. If you're in this boat and you think it might be affecting you, look at your payment gateway. Your payment processor has likely never lost a single penny of transactions. Now compare that to the same time frame revenue, sales numbers in Google Analytics if you have your e-commerce tracking set up. And what you'll find is that Google loses an awful lot of pennies. Lee, have you had to deal with analytics at all?
Some, but usually you run into the same sort of issues where different trackers are telling you different things, or sometimes even using URL shorteners to go to a page, you can see how many visitors you had in one versus another, or if you've got a string of pages fit together, you can see where the things are off. And it's a lot of it I learned from earlier Fight Club episodes where you would talk about all the different ways the data was lossy. So now I'm like everybody else, it's analytics is a guesstimate and should be treated as such.
Yeah, if you view it as it's a 15% statistical sampling and ask questions appropriate for that, you'll probably be okay. Let's see, we have a few questions here. The first one is, Ted, when you worked in e-com, what SEO rules would you give the product upload team so the products would be somewhat optimized from the start? What was the 80-20 that gave the best results? You have to really pick your battles, because if you ask too much of them, they hate you. So you really want to ask for a minimum of things, and those minimum of things need to provide the best bang for the buck. And so what I would do is I would collect data and I would show them data illustrating the problem. So if they're believers, they want their products to succeed, but it's important that you get them on board and seeing what you're seeing and believing what you're believing. Once you successfully do that, probably the 2 or 3 things that I would go after first is how they name the products. I would get them to minimize punctuation in product names wherever possible. And I would get them to avoid artistic names, try to be factual. So instead of calling it, the majestic sunset neck warmer, just look them in the eye and tell them it's an orange scarf, so call it an orange scarf. That's how people are going to find it. When When you get all artistic like that, it's like, sure, okay, you can be that business that's, better than everyone else because you have artistic style, but just note that you just threw all of your organic revenue in the trash. That's what it costs you. So name things for how people find them. And the same thing is true with product categories. So common example, we had a category called gifts and delights. What the hell is a delight? And when was the last time you searched for one? Conjoined categories are a no-no, like when you say socks and shoes. The only people who care that you have, 100 pairs of shoes and 3 pairs of socks, because store owners are like, oh, I can't show a category with 3 products in it. Yeah, you can. It's to the point. This is what we offer. I hope one of them works for you. That's what you need to do. Nobody else out there cares except our own ego. And because they don't want a largely empty category, they're going to make you page through 10 pages of shoes to find the 3 pairs of socks. And it's a horrible experience. So getting them to stop conjoining categories is a big one. And then making sure that they don't recycle URLs, because one of the things that marketers often want to do is they want to recycle the URL for seasonal things. So when Mother's Day or when Easter's done, they'll reuse the URL for Mother's Day or things like that. Don't do that, because that URL is going to rank for bunnies and stuff. And the next holiday to come along, it's going to be all the wrong keywords. So you need specific URLs that are committed to those occasions. Don't recycle them. It'd be things like that for sure. Clint, what do you think? Anything that should be on that short list?
I had to step away, so I didn't hear a word you said.
Oh, okay, so I'll take that away from you. All right, the next question, how did you approach multiple products that could all compete for the same keyword? They can be different in terms of what part of the broad match they get. So if I had, favorite example, wireless Xbox headsets, you might sell 15 different Xbox wireless headsets. They all kind of target the exact same keyword. Google will typically show 2 of them for that primary keyword. But then there are all of these keywords of opportunity that are very closely related. You may have, up to, 500 or 1,000 very closely related terms. Divvy up the list. Each one gets a part of the list. So one might get, the best wireless Xbox headset for Minecraft, and the next one gets the best wireless Xbox headset for Call of Duty. And so just divvy up the extended broad match keyword reach among those products. The next thing you can do is harder to manage, and it typically requires custom development. But when one of those goes out of stock, you 410 it so that it gets out of search. So something that's in stock can take its place faster. We did that in our store. It was a great way of making sure that we always had in-stock product showing up in search results. Next question is for Clint. Any good PR agency in the US for e-commerce that you can recommend?
I'm still using magicpr.net for most of that stuff.
Yeah, it's a very affordable service. They can take a week or 2 in fulfillment, but that's okay for me. How fast are they for you?
Yeah, it's about a week or two because they're actually writing the PRs, and then if you get the premium one, he syndicates twice. So he syndicates to one network, and then you get the report, and then you get syndicated again to another network, and then you get the report, and then from there he's building the backlinks, which is why it's more expensive than all the other ones because he's actually pushing. He's got a service behind just publishing PRs, so that's why I use it. Otherwise, I'd have to do the backlink stuff by myself, and I just pay to have that done. So.
Yeah, and he's very friendly too. So if you have special needs, just reach out to him and talk to him. And that is magicpr.com. His name is Madge. Let's see. Any other comments? And checking. I have a couple places to look for comments. All right, so I think that's it for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. And next week, there will not be a show. We'll resume the week after. I'm going to be on a family vacation. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, everybody.